Here is another major mistake you can avoid in the Philippines. This is someone's story. Robin says, I just read this frightening story in another group about leasing land as a foreigner. He paid 2 million pesos for 350 square meters of land on a 25-year lease outside Dumaguete. The first 3 years were paid up front, then annual payments. He built his house and, on paper, everything looked perfect. But when he traveled to the USA for a year, the problems began. Tenants he had arranged fled after neighbors made life unbearable for them. He just put the keys in the mailbox. The landowner suddenly said, quote, no Airbnb or rentals here, even though it wasn't in the contract. Trying to enforce his rights through legal channel is slow, expensive, and even dangerous, requires being on site, which is something he, of course, couldn't do. Having to constantly bribe the neighbors and landowner thousands of pesos, I can see so many risks that exist with leasing land in the Philippines as a foreigner. If the leaseholder gives up or even worse, dies, the house could revert to the landowner. Paying years up front is extremely risky in a country where short-term thinking dominates. 1, or in this case 3 years, is an eternity, and the locals probably feels like the rent is already spent, leaving no visible income for the leaseholder. Neighbors and locals' social pressure can make it impossible for anyone to live there, effectively evicting tenants regardless of the contract. Mark owners can suddenly change the rules in practice even if the contract says otherwise. Long-term lease contracts are fragile. Legal enforcement exists on paper, but in reality, being absent can mean losing control entirely. Cultural and social norms can make long-term planning almost meaningless. What seems unreasonable from an outsider's perspective, like paying years in advance, can be seen as absurd locally. In the Philippines, the hard truth is that the person who is present, aware, and able to manage local dynamics effectively decides what really happens, not the contract, not the money, not the paperwork. Another fool learning a lesson the hard way. Who would pay someone in the Philippines 3 years in advance? This person clearly has never, ever lived in the Philippines. Perhaps he simply visited, and that is it, because anyone with half a brain will tell you that is one of the biggest mistakes you can make in the Philippines is to pay a large sum of money up front to anyone. Because in the Philippines, they don't care about what happens in the future, they want it now, even though it's your right. Contracts don't mean anything at all. They're essentially useless. So don't think the contract somehow protects you. You have no legal recourse in the Philippines because it will cost you more in time and money, and you have nothing to gain from it. Don says, yes, own or lease presence is required to look after your interests. Seems like common sense to me. To many people, anyone who puts money into the Philippines and not see immediate return, then that person deserves this kind of payback because they're too simple, too stupid to think Filipinos would actually hold the word or the end of the contract. Always rent month to month. Ensure an exit clause. Absolutely. Chad is correct. Always rent month to month. Never pay any more money than you can afford to walk away from or simply lose, because that is the end goal in the Philippines, to take your money, no matter what a contract or lease agreement says. Jack Stanton says, a friend bought a resort in the Philippines just to find out 2 months later that the person that sold him the resort did not own it. He paid cash. The Philippines is a third world country with no safeguards. Lawyers aren't always honest. You are taking a chance. Be careful. Well, your friend is stupid. What an idiot. However, as we all know, there are many idiots in the Philippines, including expats. Craig says, after living 14 years in the Philippines, one thing I've learned, we have no rights. As far as the government goes, it likes us because we bring money, but outside this, when it comes to the law, they can do what they want. There is no way in hell I would invest money in this country. I originally came here with the impression of either buying a condo or marrying a local girl and we get a house. I know a few expats that have done this, and so far it's been 50-50 on them saying it was the right move. My biggest argument against buying into property is you can't move if things go bad, which they so often do. You get on the wrong side of your neighbors, then your life turns from good one into living hell. Like I said, we don't have rights here. Cops will be unbiased most of the time and will help you to a degree. This I know by experience, but this is even a maybe or how much you can pay them. I lived in a nomadic lifestyle, and this is the way to go living full time in the Philippines. I own a car and a TV, and that's it. I pay my rent a month to month everywhere I go, and I have only what fits in my car. If I don't like it, or I'm bored, or whatever, I can pack a bag and leave. That's total freedom to me. I don't even keep my money in the Philippines. My money sits in the same bank back in the US for decades now. 14 years of this, even when I have met a girl and we have lived together, she has been okay with this way of living. Anyone considering moving to the Philippines, consider seriously on what you know, on the area you want to invest in, and please don't stay in Dumaguete. Of course, this person makes sense. Everything he says, I agree with. Only rent. No point of buying anything in the Philippines. You will never see, firstly, a return on investment. Secondly, you run the risk of getting scammed. And thirdly, you are stuck. You're stuck there. If you don't like your neighbors, if you don't like a relationship, if you're viewing strong opt into giving people bribes, there are simply too many cons and reasons not to invest in the Philippines. Perhaps there are some positive stories, but the majority of them are extremely negative. Andrew Fuller says, here's a story to make everybody laugh. Foreigner guy meets Filipina. He buys a small 150 square lot, of course, under her name. Then guy builds a small 2-bedroom house, but legally it puts under his name, which is allowed. 3 years later, wife gets caught cheating with the Filipino guy, so guy kicks wife out, and then the trouble starts as she legally owns land, but not the house. She tries to kick him out and the house through barangay, but because he had documentation stating it's legally his house, barangay can't do anything. So without his knowledge, wife sells the lots. New owners turn up and get a surprise when guy tells them that they own the land, but he owns the house. Shows them title of the house, so no entry. But wife told new owners they own the house as well. Because of the stress, guy just wants to move to another part of the Philippines, and he has had enough. He also found out his wife is pregnant to a Filipino guy, so he organized on a weekend to give a big digger a ride. He takes all his belongings out and gets a digger to knock down the house into a nice pile. Now, new owners are taking his wife to court, LOL, and of course his wife had been spending up large being plastic Filipina. New landowners have filed criminal complaints against wife for estafa, and she will end up in jail because he has spent most of the money. Now wife is begging this guy to please save her, and he has just cut off contact, started new Facebook contact page, deleted old profile to stop her having any contact with him, and filed adultery charges against his wife. It pays to have a good lawyer in this country, for sure. Yes, a win for the foreigners, if true. I've heard something similar in the past. Like I said, there may be 1 or 2 random cases where it's beneficial to invest in the Philippines. Imagine yourself having to knock down your own house that you built because of a legal dispute with your Filipino wife who cheated on you. I do not want to be in that position. This is yesterday's best comment. Paul says, food is cheaper in Taiwan, even though it tastes 100 times better, and it is actually not poison like in the Philippines. Rent is about the same price as well, even though quality in life in Taiwan decimates the Philippines beyond comprehension. Yes, you cannot compare any other Southeast Asia to the Philippines because that is how far back the Philippines is behind everyone else. There is no worst comment. Thank you for watching. God bless.